You have to be sold out for Jesus and care enough for everybody else so that you're of some use here on earth, right? So let's go ahead. We're going to pray. And we have a big subject coming up, and it's not an easy subject. I'm really glad that you're here to tackle on one of the toughest things that personally atheists have said is one of the toughest ones that we have. So we're going to go ahead and start this. By the way, I don't know, does anybody know how to do the audio visual? Right now we've got, I've got my, well, this isn't mine. I don't know if that works anymore. But oh, there we go. I have a second PowerPoint. It's beneath the first one on the desktop. While he's doing that, let's go ahead and pray. Thank you, Father, for who you are. You are more than life to us, God. We love you. We love you. We know that you love us so much. You know that you're intimately involved in our lives, every part, the big things and the small things. You know how we're feeling today. You know the things that we're struggling with. You even know, Lord, the people that you've put on our minds, Lord, that are on our heart, that maybe have walked away from the faith or begin to doubt their faith, or boy, even in a group this size, we're thinking it might even be us, or that some of us might be doubting our faith. Nonetheless, you care for us, and where we find ourselves today spiritually, you're never going to love us any less than you love us right now, because you give us your infinite love and wisdom. We thank you, God. So God, we ask you right now by your Spirit, would you guide us into a time of truth and sensitivity so that we can not only learn something, but God, be trained so that we can help others, Lord. Give us a heart for others. Be bold to take that step for others. We give you thanks, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. So we're going to talk about something that comes up quite often, and that is, how could a good God allow evil and suffering? So this isn't, so it's going to be the other one. So not this one, it's going to be the other one. Okay, so how could a good God allow evil and suffering? You may have even asked this. And from the 3rd century, and so the problem of evil, let's talk about this. The problem of evil comes quite often with, help me, Lord. The problem of evil goes something like this, okay? The atheists say, well, Christian, I have a problem for you. Bet you can't solve this one. It's kind of like, they're asking you a question like, hey, if you think God can do anything, well, can he create a rock so heavy he can't lift? Smarty pants? What do you think about that question? Questions like that are called non-secular because what happens, it doesn't follow, in the categories are not right. Because God doesn't fit in the category of rocks. He's not physical, he's spiritual. So it doesn't fit, all right? It's kind of like, this is just different categories. So it's almost like, I don't know. It's almost like saying, how heavy is the color orange? I don't know. I think my battery went out here. It was blinking, so it was giving us a little alarm. Guys, you want to take this? It's probably my microphone. The light went out. So you're going to need some batteries. Okay, batteries, okay. So it's not that. It doesn't follow, okay? So if you ever have a friend ask you these questions like that, thanks so much. You guys know it's a matter of categories. And don't get involved with questions like that, okay? Like smarty pants. How come God can't create a rock so heavy he can't lift? Right? Don't get into those type of discussions. They're not worth it. But a good problem that atheists will ask is something like this. Defining the problem of evil. So let's go ahead. Defining the problem of evil. Atheists say something like this. If God is all good, all right? And we say, yes, he's all good. He's infinitely good. He's 1,000% good, okay? If he's so good, he would eliminate evil. Right? Or, if God is all-powerful, okay, he could eliminate evil. Okay? So basically, they're looking at these two things. God being all love and God being all-powerful. But because evil exists, the problem exists for them in an atheist mind. Sorry, it's not working. Did I do something wrong?
It's okay. I'll have the mic on the lectern for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. So the problem exists. So the problem is this. So either God is not good enough or he's not powerful enough. Now on the face value, this is a big problem. Matter of fact, when you talk to your atheistic friends or people that are beginning to doubt the faith, this is one of the number one problems they have with God. Okay? Either the God you're following, Christian God, is not really as good as you think, or he's not as powerful as you think. So what are you going to do? Again, if you were here the first hour as we talked about this, when these type of things come up, you have a 10-second window to respond. Your 10-second window said, are you going to engage them in conversation or are you just going to let it go? And many times, honestly speaking, it's like Jesus is knocking at the door of our heart. He's knocking at the door of our mind. He says, respond, respond, respond. And we go, oh God, let me count to 12. And the 10 seconds are passed. And we go, oh, praise God, I don't have to answer now. That's what usually happens. And we just let it go. God wants us to be people where we can respond, have good, solid answers, arguments, not being argumentative, but arguments for such a case, a problem of evil. Frank Turek says this, good reason provides all the information we need to see that the very existence of evil is a contradiction for atheism. Is a contradiction for atheism. Okay? So, let's talk about this. Why is that so? Why is evil actually a good argument for Christianity, for God himself? The absolute presence of evil. You would think that would be an argument against God. Well, let's take a look at it. First question we want to ask is, did God create evil? All right? It seems that whenever something bad happens, people blame it on God. Remember the tsunami in 2004 that wiped out so many thousands of people? The question is, why did God do this? Well, wait a second. One second you don't believe in God, and the next question you're blaming him for natural disasters. Right? Wait a second. So maybe that's a good question. Do you believe there is a God in order to blame? Or do you just like to pin the blame on someone when disasters happen? We just ask. The question just still comes back is, how did evil get here, and did God create evil? The one thing that we need to see is that if God created everything, the question goes, and evil is something, doesn't that mean God created evil? You see the line of reasoning? The way that arguments work, again, I'm not trying to get too technical, but you have premises, okay, to base. So the premise is God created everything. That's premise one. Premise two, and evil is something. That's premise for 1 and 2. Conclusion of that premise is God created evil. You see that works? That's an argument. An argument is made up of premises and a conclusion. Well, it's really more than that. And let's break it down, and you can see why there's a faulty premise here. And sometimes when you see this argument or you hear this argument, you're not able to pick it up right away. I wonder if you can even take a look at it right now if you can see the faulty premise. Let's move on, okay? We'll point it out. Number one, we know that God tells us in Genesis 1, 1 John 1, Colossians 1, God created everything. God created everything. Everything? It says everything, okay? But here's the thing. Evil is a thing, but evil is something. That is something we also have to come to a conclusion about. Evil is something. Doesn't mean that we can weigh it, we can see it, but it is something. So it's something we have to reckon with. Now, number 3 is so huge. Evil is a corruption of a good thing. Now let me give you a few examples. You take a rotting piece of fruit, like an apple. Rot does not exist by itself. It cannot. Rot is a corruption of the good of what is the apple. I know you guys don't want to think about this second illustration, but think of the rust that's on parts of your car. I know some of your cars are so pristine, there's no rust, I know. But some of us that live maybe closer to the sea and there's rust that comes up. The rust, there's no such thing as rust without the chrome. You see that? Or the steel. The rust doesn't exist on its own. It is only a corruption of what is good. Now we're beginning to get somewhere. We're beginning to see that evil isn't just something floating out in space on its own. It's only in existence to a corruption to what is the good. Without that good, there cannot be that corruption. Without that corruption, that evil cannot exist. So now look at number 4. God created only good things, but evil is the corruption of his good creation. So you see that? You look at this now, and you look back at the previous slide, you could see where the premise 2 was faulty. It's not that God didn't create everything he did, and evil is something. But now we need to qualify what that something is. Number 3 then qualifies it for us. Evil is a corruption of a good thing. It's not, evil itself was not created by God. See, there's something really tricky here I want to point out before we go on. Can God, we sing and we say this all the time, God can do everything. Technically that's not true. I know, this might be tough for you, some of you guys, but I want you to think with me that technically it's not true. God cannot do everything. And it's really hard to take, I know. But think about this. God cannot lie. Right? He cannot go against his nature. Okay? There are certain things he cannot do. He cannot just snap his finger and say, forget about everything that I put in place, the laws in this world. There's too much pain and suffering. Let's just do away with all of it. Or let's just let everybody in the world have a free pass and let's just put them into heaven and forget about the laws. That he can't do that. See, you understand that? But when people say God can do everything, you understand what we're talking about. Is he powerful enough? Is he great enough? Yes. But technically speaking, there are things that God cannot do. And again, those things that don't make any sense, like can he create a rock that he can't lift? You know, the thing is, can he make a shield that can protect you against every arrow? Can God make an arrow so sharp it can penetrate every shield? You know, this is nonsensical stuff. Okay? Things like that. And then what happens if you take these two things against each other? Who's going to win? The shield or the sword or the spear that God creates? You see what I mean? It's just, these are nonsensical type of things. We're not talking about those things, but when we talk about the nature of God, there are certain things that God cannot do. One of the things that God did not do was he did not create evil. It's really important to point out to your friends. God did not create evil. Because if it did, it would reflect upon his character. He is 100% good God. He did not create evil. There are evil things in this world. There is evil in this world. It is a thing, premise 2. We acknowledge that. Now we can start talking. But what people do is they'll go 1, 2, 4. God created everything. Evil is something. God's responsible for every evil act on the face of this earth and the entire universe. That's what they want to do. They want to put the entire blame on God. So let's talk a little more about this. Where does corruption come from? We're going to talk about 2 types of corruption. Where does corruption come from? Human corruption or moral evil comes from free will. Okay? There's moral evil. Okay? Matter of fact, this argument, this one thing right here, is what brought C.S. Lewis to Jesus Christ. I encourage you to read Mere Christianity. It's been in print for many, many years. Get a copy of Mere Christianity. Mere Christianity on page 45. This is what C.S. Lewis, British writer, philosopher, says. He goes, as an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seemed so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? How did I even know that? How did that standard come about in my life? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? And it was like a light bulb that went on in his head. Because he knew that there was a standard right and wrong. It turned him to Jesus Christ. The other question that people have is, why doesn't God stop moral evil? He could, by the way. This is one of the things he could do. But in order for God to stop moral evil right now, he'd have to destroy us all. He'd have to kill everybody. And then moral evil will be done with. We have to go back a little bit to understand this. Regarding purpose of life and evil, see, many people believe we are deserving. God owes it to us that we have a pain-free, pleasure-filled life here on earth. But God gave us much more realistic view, right? 1 John 16:33. Well, I'm skipping here. In this world you will have trouble or tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. There is trouble in this world. He made us with a mind. He made us to, like himself, to reason and to think. He also made us with something else. He made us with the possibility of choosing something else other than himself and his will. See, or else it would not have been worthwhile. Why would God simply create machines? Automatons, that was called. Why would God just simply create machines? He doesn't. He creates us with a mind to think. He creates us with the will to believe. And he also gave us free will to not choose him. And C.S. Lewis writes in Mere Christianity, and he goes, and God was willing to take that risk. God was willing to take that risk so that we would truly love him. Because if he programmed us in such a way that we could only respond like a robot, that's not really love. He made us so that we would choose on our own and are having a free will to do it. Now, we're not getting into predestination, the sovereignty of God, plan of God, and all this type of thing. We know that God is the one that draws us, changes our hearts in order for us to do it. But humanly speaking, on our way, we feel that, of course, it's our choice. And it is our choice. We are responsible. And that's how love must be. It can't be something that is so programmed that we have no other choice. So God made us with choice for him. But he also made it so that people would not choose him. So, can God stop moral evil? Yes. He can do it right now. But he'd have to destroy us all. He'd have to take away the very thing that makes us human, that we would be able to choose. You see, there are going to be people, even today, people in this room probably, that we're going to sin today. That's terrible, because that's not God's will. God's will is to do what is right. In this world, there will be people not doing God's will, not doing according to what is right. There's going to be plenty of sin on this world, in this earth today, even this moment, right now. But God says, it's worth the risk. And I'm patient, and I give time to this earth to turn to me. But meanwhile, there's a lot of bad choices going on. And there's a lot of bad moral evil. Think of Africa. Africa, there's a starvation problem. Okay? People say that there's not enough food. It's not true. There's a lot of food. But sometimes because of governments, the crooked governments that are there, the choices made by their leaders, the food doesn't get to the people, so they starve. Now, see, that's a moral evil by the leaders of their land. Think of India. So many people, 1.1, 1.3 billion people in India right now. Do they lack food? No, they don't lack food. Do you know how many cows there are in that land? Man, I can take a lot of good steaks. But they don't kill their cows. That's a choice to make. But that's some good food right there, let me tell you. If we let people have that steak and we fry up them burgers and steaks, I tell you, they feed a lot of people. Okay? So it's choices that we make all of a sudden. So it's not that people are starving because there's no food. And so it is with so many choices that we make as human beings that are either killing people or restricting people. But God has now allowed moral evil because of his patience. And there's going to be a time when time will be no more. And we don't have those choices anymore. But in the meantime, he gives us choice. So this is something really important to know. Did God create evil? No. Can God stop evil? Yes. But he won't right now because he loves us so much. Will evil ever be stopped? Will evil ever be stopped? Yes. Yes. It will be stopped. And it's coming. See, watch this. Do we really think, it's in your outline, do we really think that the God of the universe is morally obligated to make us happy here all the time? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I not pass it out? I'm sorry. Thank you for raising your hand, or else I would have just kept going with all these wonderful blank outlines in my hand. This is what happens when you have double workshops here. Sorry, everybody. Shall I start over? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. We just went through the whole first page without you guys having the outline. Very much. Boy. Well, we're halfway through it, so. So, if you're just getting the outline right now, the first blank there is defining the problem of evil, right? We need to define the problem of evil. Defining the problem of evil. And we defined it as a corruption of that which was good. Secondly, it's, did God create evil? Did God create evil? And we saw that God did not create evil. There's two types of evil in this world. And it's why doesn't God stop moral evil? So we're here right now. Why doesn't God stop moral evil? So defining the problem of evil, did God create evil, and where does corruption come from? Does corruption come from? Corruption comes from moral evil, which comes from our free will. And why doesn't God stop moral evil? Why doesn't God stop moral evil? God, again, could stop it, but if you have to kill us all to do it. The thing is, life's experiences, hardships that we have in this world, teach us lessons. Can you imagine? Think of this for a second. Pain and suffering go together with evil. It's in the same category. Can you imagine if God stepped in every time a kid was ready to scrape his knee? He trips and falls. Oh man, the kid's ready to scrape his knee, and God just commands one of his angels, whoops, there you go, you didn't scrape your knee. Can you imagine that? We said, that's pretty cool. Look at that, I didn't scrape my knee. But think about this. For the price of a scraped knee, what have we learned? Maybe we haven't learned anything. Can you imagine every time when the parent says, don't touch the hot stove, and we would touch the hot stove, and God would prevent the burns on our hands? What would we learn in that? We would learn maybe that we shouldn't listen to mom. Think about that. Can you imagine what would happen if you drove down the road and everybody in this paradoxical world, it would always be a green light? How cool would that be? But how would we develop patience? Would we ever learn that? I think we'd all be spoiled brats. God allows evil and suffering in this world for us to learn some of our greatest lessons. C.S. Lewis, in The Problem of Pain, page 81, he says this. He goes, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. He says, God is saying, I'm using pain, I'm using evil, I'm using suffering to draw people to myself. Because if they would never experience pain, if they never knew suffering, if they never experienced loss, what would drive them to it? They would be under the delusion that they can live life in themselves, that would forever be like this. And the price and the cost of sin and the consequences of even death will not harm them. Can you imagine that? So God does not prevent moral evil today. But there will be a day where evil will come to an end. Let's take a look. When will that happen? The end of evil. The end of evil. Ultimately, God defeats evil by ushering in a new heaven and a new earth. Revelation, the last two chapters of the Bible. This new earth will be free from all evil and its effects. I tell you what will happen then. We right now have the choice to follow God or not to follow God. To do God's will or not to do God's will. To cause suffering or not to cause suffering. In the future, moral evil will be taken away and we will be sealed for all time that the choices we make forevermore in heaven will be for good and for Him. Now for you science geeks out there, follow me a little bit. Why I believe this. This is not in the Bible, but this is just me talking here. Death and even time itself will be done away with. Even time itself. The judgment. According to physics, if you don't have change, you don't have time, you don't have change. Think about that. God's going to allow us in a time. That's why when we say 1,000 years for God is like a second, because for him, he's outside of time. God is in the past as he is in the future, as he is in the present right now. He makes us so that, not that we won't be allowed to grow and experience things, but time itself is not what we will understand it to be. Because there is no time, we will not be allowed the opportunity to fall again, like Adam and Eve were. And because the opportunity even to fall in that sense, and we're sealed for his goodness is there, we'll have all the opportunities of growing and living in God without this little bit of thing of time that caused the downfall of Adam and Eve. It will be taken away. So the end of evil comes, and we don't have a possibility in the future of having a secondary fall to create this whole mess again, now with many more people. It just won't happen. God ultimately takes care of moral evil. He takes care of moral evil. This is a simple one, I think. Because people understand, I make a choice, you make choices, we all make choices. There's a second type of evil in this world that people point to Christians at, especially when something bad happens, and that is natural evil. We talk about natural evil. What about natural evil? What do we say when we say natural evil? What are we really talking about? Okay? Several things we understand about natural evil. We're talking about when there's earthquakes, when there's tsunamis, when some innocent family was sitting in a park enjoying a picnic and this branch falls on them, killing the whole family. That'd be terrible, by the way. Who's to blame for that one? Park and Recreation. I don't know. But natural disasters happen all the time. So who's to blame for that? Now, remember what we said earlier. It's so important. God created only what is good. Okay? Evil is a byproduct or a corruption of what is good. But what about in the natural sense? We know that the world was made, Genesis 1 tells us that. The fall came in Genesis 3. And with the coming of evil came death. And there came even a groaning and a yearning now in creation for its adoption. That is when a new heaven and new earth is created in Revelation 21:22. In the meantime, the groaning and yearning continues. That is the corruption that is now not only in moral evil, in human choice, but in creation itself. There is a corruption in the creation itself. Now, when God created the animals did not eat each other. After the fall, animals started eating each other. Right? Death started coming in the world. Things started to happen. You think about this. Without natural processes in place, good things would not have been able to happen. Now, wherever you believe, we're not really getting the issue of evolution here, but think about this. It's pretty clear that in plate tectonics, when you study how the Earth and the continents were formed, that at one time, South America and Africa were together. No matter what you say, and we can talk about this in terms of Christian belief, plate tectonics played a role in these continents drifting apart to where they are right now. Right? Okay? I think we can agree on that. This is science, and I don't think hope it doesn't mess up anybody's Christian belief on creation. But plate tectonics, the movement of the plates that are on this earth, are responsible. Whenever they move, they're so massive, cause earthquakes. So what do we say about that? So we say, sometimes natural evil is a byproduct of good processes, because we still are in a fallen world. So, there's going to be well, the Bible already says, there's going to be an increase in earthquakes when the end comes. Near the end. We're gonna see the next earthquake, people, there might be incredible devastation. And then there will be that natural cry again. Why did God do this? You see that question already? The God that they don't believe in, now they blame? Maybe all of this is simply a byproduct of good processes that were part of creation, in the good creation. It's just naturally how it has now happened. Now, it still doesn't explain the reason of why. That's always in God's mind. But at least we understand something. We can have natural evil as a byproduct sometimes of good processes. It just is. Okay? Secondly, it's the result of moral evil. We've already talked a little bit about this. Sometimes bad choices. People like in Africa, that because it's not that there's a shortage of food, but because the government doesn't release the food to its people, that's an evil, moral evil that now is causing pain and suffering naturally for the people in the food. Same thing for India and many other choices. Sometimes it's a result of moral evil. Okay? Thirdly, this is where it's really difficult. Unknown reasons to us, but God has morally sufficient reasons. We simply don't know the mind of God. There's sometimes we just say, we just don't know. But we know some things. We know God didn't create evil. We know that people get hurt. But we don't know ultimately why certain things happen until maybe even until eternity. When you read in Genesis the story of Joseph, it's a staggering story, right? Genesis 30, 39, and 50. And you read the story of Joseph. You go, if you're just tagging along with Joseph, how is it that you understand his life? He was already not really particularly liked by his brothers. I mean, he was already getting picked on a little bit, okay? So you kind of feel for him. But how did even that fits into a greater scheme of things? He becomes a favorite of his father. That does not help. Okay? In those days when clothes were very scarce, and he gets a coat, a multicolored coat, have color back then. Even before, the invention of dyes and things. It was so difficult to get that. It must have cost a fortune. And for Joseph to get that, and all of a sudden jealousy is brewing. And all of a sudden he goes, man, I'm getting treated worse now. He might have even thought, maybe it's better my dad didn't give me this coat. Maybe I wish I didn't have this coat. They're treating me so terribly. And then the unthinkable. All of a sudden, they're gonna kill him. They're gonna put him down this cistern, this giant well, and they're just gonna leave him there and to die. So they can say, we didn't technically kill him. He just starved on his own in his well. And then they get a little greedy. They sell him as a slave, not as a brother anymore. Turns him into a slave. He gets exported out of there. He gets taken all the way to Egypt. You snapshot every one of those. You go, what good is this guy? What did I do in my life that would cause you to be so angry at me? Can you imagine Joseph thinking something like that? Think about that. He does everything right. Even when he's serving, under Potiphar, everything's going well. This is going good. He resists temptation. He runs out of there. He gets accused of wrongdoing. He gets jailed. Potiphar is in charge of the guards in the jail. But he knows he's innocent. But because he wants to protect the name of his wife, he throws him into jail. But since he knows Joseph's character, he puts him in charge of the entire jail. So he puts him in charge of the entire jail. All of a sudden, these two guys with their crazy dreams, he goes, remember when you get out of there. One of them doesn't remember. 2 years later, he remembers him, brings him to Pharaoh. He says, I can tell you to interpret your dreams. He gets elevated again to the place now he's basically second in command. 7 years of famine come. His family comes and he rescues them. And that story right there is not just a personal, nice little story. He saves the entire Jewish people. But you look at every snapshot of that and go, why did are you doing this, God? And we don't see the grander picture until finally at the end. It was for the salvation of the entire people. Wow, no idea. If it was just all about pain and suffering, and he took away every one of those painful situations, Joseph wouldn't have been used this way. I love that Genesis 50:20 principle. It's not here, and you guys have probably already heard it. But in Genesis 50:20 it says, God, you meant it for evil, as he spoke to his brother, but God meant it for good. And we don't know that. You meant it for evil, God meant it for good. Even when there's terrible things that happen. I mean, I look like a person, like, it might be before your time, but in the 70s, there was a really vibrant girl. Really pretty, very athletic. She was diving one day, snapped her neck when she was diving, and all of a sudden she's paralyzed from the neck down. And you go, that's terrible. I would never wish that upon anybody. Now you interview her, she goes, this is one of the best things that happened in my life. And that was Joni Erickson. She's got a whole ministry now. We just don't know. So we are in a culture that just, we don't like it when we're not comfortable. We're so picky, you think about it. Everything's got to be just right. We don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable. No pain, no suffering. We just don't realize that God uses pain and suffering in integral ways. So sometimes we just have to tell people, we don't know. But there are certain things we do know. So let's talk about it. Okay. I know not a lot of atheists like this. It's very satisfying. But it gives us something in us to answer. You see that? It's not just, you see, this is the greatest reason against Christianity, or a reason why I say now many people see this as one of the greatest reasons for Christianity. Because if there is a reason, get back to premise 2 and 3, if there indeed is evil, and evil is a thing, we can say, and evil is a corruption of a good thing, there must in its essence be a good thing. And if evil is this strong and so powerful, then its counterpart must be that much greater in its essence of good. Because if there's such evil in this world, there must be at least that level of good in this world. And where does that level of good come from? Who sets that standard for what is good? So when atheists point out there's evil in this world, they're making, actually, you follow this line of reasoning, they're making a great case for us as believers that God exists. Because in order to have that level of evil, you must have an incredible level of goodness and of God in this world. All right. I don't know how many of you guys were here in the first hour, but in the first hour, we talked about not only knowing something, information, which is important, but also we talked about skill. Skill. Okay, we need skill in order to communicate with our friends. A certain tactic in order to do this. So we talked about certain questions that we need that are tools for us. Apologetics, the word apologia, it means defense in Greek. To offer up support, sound reasoning, so that we escape from circular reasoning, other than just saying my faith is my faith and it's only my faith, or the Bible says so because the Bible says so. We give sound reasoning so that we're able to escape circular reasoning. We do two things in apologetics. One is called offensive apologetics. No, it's not offensive, meaning, bad tasting. It's offensive in that offensive apologetics makes a positive statement for Christianity, and defensive apologetics gives answers to the challenges of Christianity. That's what's happening here. So we asked 3 questions. Put on, like, the investigator, Columbo. If you guys remember the 70s show from 1971, 72 or so, Columbo, he was this bumbling guy with his raincoat. He always didn't seem like he knew what he was doing. He would just say the weirdest things, but he was always inquisitive. He was always attuned, and he always asked simple questions. We need to be like Columbo, particularly when our friends say this. Now, when a friend asks a question, we can give information, like we see the sheet that you go through. How can a good God allow evil and suffering? If that's an honest question, you say, well, let me sit down, let me show you some ways where it can happen. So we talk about how God only created good. He didn't create evil. Evil was a byproduct of this. We live in a fallen world that has the byproduct. He made us so that we can have choice. And if you want to do away with evil right now, you might as well kill us all right now. But God doesn't do that. And in his goodness, he gives us time and his patience. There will be a day when he does away with everything. He recreates heaven and earth. But until that time, make use of the gift of time God has given us, because there will be a time when time will be no more. Okay? So, these questions, is he truly good? Let's talk about that. How do we know God is truly good? That's great. We can have a good conversation about that. Is he truly powerful? Remember, those are the two premises and the accusations that atheists have for Christians. Is he either truly good or is he truly powerful? Because if he's truly good, how does he allow evil? And if he's truly powerful, why isn't he handling it right now? Now we have tools to answer these questions. Is he truly good? Yes, he is. And he's so good, he didn't want to make us robots. He made us with free will to choose him or not to choose him. He made it so that we can choose to follow him or not. To do good or to do evil. Is he powerful enough? Absolutely. But he will not do it in such a way that he controls us like robots. He's too good. It's not that he's not powerful enough. But there will be a time where he's so powerful, he will do away with evil. Okay? Now, question 2. I don't believe anyone can know what is truly good or evil. Right? Or I don't believe evil exists. This is when we put on our Columbo hat. When you have a statement like this by your friends, or even if you're thinking about it, you have friends that say this, you begin to put on your Columbo hat and you ask these 3 questions. If you're here in the first hour, it's a little bit of a review for you, but if you're just getting in here, these are the questions we need to, and type of questions we need to ask. The first is this: what do you mean by that? Well, Columbo would say this. He would preface this as, he'd go, very kindly, may I ask you a question? You see that? You see how beautiful that is? Maybe people don't want to talk about it. We have to give them the right to say, I don't want to talk about it. That's okay. But may I ask you a question is such a great opening. Because may I ask you a question respects that person. Before we all these questions, may I ask you a question? What are the type of questions? We're going to get into 3 types of questions. The first one, what do you mean by that? I don't believe anyone can know what is truly good or evil. Is it that you don't really know what is good or evil? Okay? Or you don't believe that good or evil exists? Or you have a problem defining it? Or is it that you are unclear about it, but perhaps you believe other people know? Clarify that for me. What do you mean by that? Okay? And then as you talk further, the second question is, how did you come to that conclusion? How did you come to that conclusion? What are some of the things that you're thinking? In philosophy, they say, what are your premises? You wouldn't say that to them. It's not normal language that we talk about. But what are things undergirding your understanding? How did you get to that? What are some things that you're building on that brings you to this type of conclusion? Question 3 is a leading question. It's, may I ask you, have you ever considered? Have you ever considered? Or variations of this question. It's like, can you clear this up for me? Can you help me understand this? It's a leading question to help them see contradictions that they may have in their statements. There's one thing I didn't talk to you guys about, either the first hour or now, so I'm going to bring it up now, is something called the professor's ploy. Okay? It might have happened historically, I don't know. It's like almost folklore now. But in some of these religion classes where they teach that there is no God, you might have a student that's really strong in their faith stand up one day and says, Professor, I disagree with that. I believe there is a God. I believe that God loved us so much that he sent his son Jesus Christ to die for us, and that if we come to him, he will forgive us of our sins, and we can live a life that's completely different than you. And the person will then say, Professor says, well, I don't believe that, and that's not what I'm going to be teaching in this class. And the teacher says, well, excuse me, but I do believe that. And all of a sudden, other students are riveted between this conversation between that student and that professor. And sometimes the professor, as the story goes, may say, okay, smart Alec, why don't you come up here and tell us what you believe? Now, at that point, it sounds like a great invitation to go on and give your testimony and lead the people in a prayer for repentance. Don't get sucked into it. You're on his playing field. Everything's stacked up against you. You say, no, Professor, this is your class. Help me understand what you believe. You turn the Columbo question back on him. He's the one that made the statement from the beginning that God would not be allowed in this class. Just like with your friends. Do not let them turn that question back on you. It's called the professor's ploy. Remember, when you see a statement, it's not a question. When a person says, I don't believe God is truly good. I don't believe God is truly powerful. You're not the one making that statement. They are. Do not take the bait of turning it back. Now you're the one on the defensive again. You see that? Okay? This is really important. It's called the professor's ploy. You say, no. I'm not the one that feels this way. Matter of fact, I just want to understand what you're saying. See? So the student in that university classroom, same thing. Professor, this is your classroom. I think, I just need to understand what you're teaching. By the way, you may go to the third question. Have you ever considered this? Have you ever considered, Professor, that you may be wrong? And Professor, if it can be proven and shown to you that you are wrong, will you choose to teach differently? You see that? It's back on him again. So these are some of the things that we need to practice. We have a few minutes here. We just have about 10 minutes here. If you weren't here for the first hour, this is what I said. Information is everywhere. There are plenty of apologetics books. I even brought a few if you want to take a look at them that I feel are readable and that it's helpful to people at any age. But that's not the true value of an apologetics presentation like today. You can get information anywhere. That's not the problem, is it? It's almost like Bibles. Bibles are not the problem. We have an abundance of Bibles. One time I counted in my house, I had 20-something Bibles. It's not that we don't have enough information, but we need skill, we need practice. We need to share with our non-Christian friends and family members in a non-hostile way, in a loving way. We have to practice so that when we are in these conversations, we don't get too heated. Because if people are angry at us and we're angry at them, and we're not engaging with the thoughts and issues, we've done a poor job. Now, we might think we're being persecuted for the sake of Christ, but in reality, maybe we're just taking this all upon ourselves. You understand? It's not really suffering for Christ. It's suffering because we did something that was not necessary. Okay? So, we're going to try this. Matter of fact, I'm going to try to just help us. You can see the information. So with these next 10 minutes, either take the first question. First question is, first question is what? First question is, how can a good God allow evil and suffering? Right? And we want to go through that. Is he truly good? Is he truly powerful? Okay? And we have a dialogue, and I want you to use this resource sheet to answer that and be comfortable. And again, try to memorize this, because you're not going to have this when you're going to these conversations. And then we're going to go to the second question. Second question then allows us to ask statements that people make. Again, I'm just imagining people coming back from college. All of a sudden, they do away with their faith. I don't believe in good and evil anymore. I believe it's all relative. I believe there's nothing wrong with doing anything evil, because I just feel like everybody has to have their own sense of what's right and wrong. Well, how do you know that? How do you come to that conclusion? Have you ever considered what society would be like if we actually lived according to what you just said? See that? A leading question. Let's break off into twos. Pair off, and we're going to practice this. The more we practice, the more we are comfortable in these type of conversations, the more likely we're able to be useful. That God will bring us in these conversations. Let's do that. Go ahead and break up into pairs, and then we'll come back after 2 minutes.